If you're one of the many people who dream of retiring early, spending more time with friends, family, or traveling, having more time for hobbies, you're not alone. But in my experience as a CFP working with early retirees, the reality of retirement often looks very different from what's imagined. I've worked with clients who achieve early retirement only to realize that there are a lot of surprising challenges that they weren't expecting. So in this video today, I'll walk you through 5 lessons I've learned working with clients who retire early in my 14 years as a CFP and how you can avoid the same mistakes. You'll gain wisdom from their experiences on surprises when it came to money, lifestyle, family, and more. So if you're thinking of retiring early, you're going to want to hear each one of them. So the first lesson is that the non-financial side is just as important as the financial side when it comes to early retirement. And I know this might be surprising to hear coming from a CFP, and it might be surprising to hear because we work so hard to build up to retirement for years and years and years. Many people who retire early say that they miss the people that they work with. And when you really think about it, that makes a lot of sense. You spend 30 to 40 hours a week with these people, and then suddenly they're not a part of your life anymore. But it's not just the people necessarily, it's also the structure and the sense of purpose. One of the retirees that I worked with early in my career retired from an insurance sales job. He was a really successful guy. He had all types of awards. He told me he was really well respected among his peers. He was even the top salesman in his office. And when I asked him if he ever missed the job, he was about 70 and he had been retired for about 15 years. He told me that no, he didn't miss the job itself, but he missed the people. So this really made me think about how important it is to have connections or a social group that you can retire to if that's something that's important to you as part of your career. But even if community isn't that important to you, which it should be, a vision is really important too. And this goes to something I ask all of the clients that I meet with when they're planning for retirement is, what does your best life actually look like? 2 of my clients who retired early recently in the past couple of years did have a vision in mind. They love to travel to Florida, specifically Key West. They have 2 daughters they like to spend time with. They have projects around the house that they wanted to focus on. So they knew when they were retiring what they wanted their best life to look like. So they travel multiple times per year together, and they both have hobbies that they're into, and they spend time with their family. And probably what's more important is they know how to communicate and be aligned on things that are important to them. Even if they don't agree 100% of the time, they're very open with each other about their needs and what they want to accomplish. So that makes it work. So that being said, this leads directly to my next lesson, which is exactly opposite of the first lesson. Don't think that just because you're retired, money doesn't matter anymore and you don't have to think about it. And I'll just give you an example. One big thing that's happening this year that's affecting a lot of early retirees who are before Medicare age at age 65 is a change in law that provides a premium subsidy for private health insurance through the marketplace. So the clients of mine that I was telling you about that retired and like to go to Key West, this is something that's going to affect them. But fortunately, they're well enough positioned that it's not going to impact whether or not they can still retire comfortably and maintain their lifestyle. But if they hadn't planned for it, they could really be in for a rude surprise. And another big example, and this is something that a lot of people are very aware of, people who retired with a budget in 2020, for example, found that 3-4 years later, the budget they retired with looked very different due to the high inflation that we experienced for years on end. So even if inflation had been, say, historically normal and not high, and if that becomes the trend going forward, you have to think about that when you retire in your 40s and 50s. Inflation is just a fact of your financial life. And over the next 30 to 40 years, even mild inflation will double the cost of living over the course of your retirement plan. So stress test your retirement plan before you retire. And this leads directly to my next financial lesson. Your retirement plan will get tested after you retire. So here's why. Markets don't always cooperate. Health changes. Family needs shift. So even the best financial plans need flexibility. One of my clients who retired about 6 years ago called me up while I was on vacation last year and told me that he needed to take $30,000 from his retirement account. One of his kids had wrecked their car and their insurance wasn't going to cover replacing it. And so his son needed a car to get to work every day. So fortunately, we ran the numbers and he was in more than a position to cover this expense to help out his family member. But that's something that an early retiree should really think about. If you have people in your life that you're going to be inclined to help out, that's something you should really think carefully about and factor into your financial plan before pulling the trigger. So another situation I've seen more than once, but I'll give you a specific example, is where people retire early and a spouse gets sick. I met with a lady years ago when I first started in this business whose husband had retired early along with her, and he ended up developing early onset Alzheimer's in his early 60s. So they quickly went from living a comfortable lifestyle in which they were going to the beach every year and spending time with their kids to her being a full-time caregiver to him as he mentally declined. So you can imagine not just the emotional strain, but the financial strain that this put on her. It's not uncommon at all for people to have somebody come in, even if you remain the primary caregiver for a sick spouse or family member, to have somebody come in and give you a break, because it can become a 24/7 job from which you get very burnt out. And this gets expensive. This can add up to easily thousands of dollars per month. And so if you retired early and you weren't planning for a thousands of dollars per month expense in your early 60s, which in their case they weren't, it can clearly make a big impact on the success of your overall financial plan. Her husband ended up passing away before he ended up needing full-time care. If he had ended up needing full-time care, that would have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year or more. So while she didn't incur that cost, she lost one of their Social Security benefits, because that's what happens when a spouse passes away, is the surviving spouse gets the higher of the two Social Security benefits for the remainder of their plan. So he passed away in his early 60s, and as a result, that's decades of Social Security benefits. I'm talking thousands of dollars per month, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of the plan that she now no longer had. So a lot of retirees I've worked with since 2011 haven't had to directly experience this, because since my career started after the Great Recession, and the retirees I've worked with have retired since then, they haven't actually seen a direct impact of a big market correction on their financial plan, like a 2008 or the tech bubble in the 2001, 2002 timeframe. But if one of those major corrections happened and you had only been planning on continuous growth in your accounts, that could have resulted in you having to unretire. And in fact, that is what happened to a lot of retirees when the Great Recession happened in 2008 and the tech bubble burst in the early 2000s. But just to cover this at a high level, if you have a bad early couple of years in retirement and you have to withdraw a large portion of your investments, that's going to impact the long-term success of your plan and your investments growing. So the real lesson here is that early retirees should plan for unexpected health changes for them or their spouse, and they should also make sure they're not being too optimistic about growth in their investments. And especially for a lot of young retirees, if you're going to be in the sandwich generation where you have kids going to college, or maybe they graduate from college but they're having a tough time getting started financially, or if you have aging parents who are going to need care, whether or not you provide that or you pay for it, think about what those types of events could mean for the success of your financial plan. So the next lesson is that it's important to retire with purpose. When you retire, you don't retire from something, you retire to something. Before you retire early, think very specifically about what you want your life to look like. It's very possible you'd still be happy consulting in your field, for example, without working full time. But maybe you just want to be done with work entirely and you want to pursue a new hobby or a passion project, or maybe there's some other career direction you always wanted to try but you never did. There's really no right or wrong answer here. You're going to quickly find there's a lot of hours in your day that you didn't have before, and you need to figure out what to do with them. So it's important to retire and have some idea of what you want to do with your day. Sure, you can retire and do whatever you want, but without a little bit of purpose and structure, you're going to quickly find that sitting on the couch all day, binge watching your favorite show, it's going to get old really fast, even though it might sound amazing right now. The other thing too that's important is, did you know that there are emotional stages of retirement? So these stages represent the process that retirees go through when they retire and transition from their working lifestyle to their financially independent lifestyle. This is really just about orienting to your post-work reality. So these stages are called the pre-retirement phase, the honeymoon phase, the disenchantment phase, the reorientation phase, and the stability phase. The pre-retirement phase is probably the most exciting phase, and it might even be where you're at right now watching this video. It's also the most anxiety-inducing stage. So in the pre-retirement stage, you're sitting there thinking about like what life is going to be like at retirement, the very first thing you're going to do next. But you might also be a little bit on edge. It's not uncommon at all for people in the pre-retirement stage, clients that we've worked with, to reach out to us and say, basically after we've shown them the numbers and things look absolutely perfect, are you sure this is going to work out? It's normal to have that type of anxiety just to make sure that once you get over to the other side, things are going to still be good for you. So the honeymoon phase is what comes next. So this could last anywhere from a few weeks up to even a year. And this looks different for everybody. But basically, this is a time of transition where all you're doing is reorienting yourself to your new reality. It could feel like an extended vacation. There's really no right way for this to look. I'll just give you an example. For my mom, when she retired, the thing she said she was most looking forward to was sitting on her back porch and having a cup of coffee every morning. So the disenchantment phase is what comes next. And a lot of retirees in the disenchantment phase report feeling bored, restless or unfulfilled. So this might be the roughest stage of retirement and unsurprisingly can result in depression and anxiety. So this is where it's really important to have people to talk to, whether it's a therapist, somebody you trust like a spouse or a close friend, or even just a community you can reach out to and confide in. One of my favorite shows is The Price is Right, and the host Drew Carey always ends the show by saying, hey, take care of your mental health. There's no shame in it. Reach out to somebody, talk to somebody, see a therapist, talk to a therapist. And he also says, I see a therapist. So I think if one of the most rich and successful people in TV history can admit to seeing a therapy, there's really nothing wrong if we need to do the same thing for ourselves. So after the disenchantment phase comes the reorientation phase. If your job was a central part of your identity when you retired, you may feel like you kind of lost a piece of yourself. So the reorientation phase is really rediscovering who you are and what is meaningful to you. So you might be doing things like volunteering, working at some new part-time job. You might even be reconnecting with old friends. My dad is a great example of this. He's been reconnecting with a lot of his friends from his time in the Navy, or even just joining new social groups. You might even take a class or pick up a new hobby. The point is, in this stage, the people who succeed never stop bettering themselves and never stop learning. It's a lifelong process. And this goes directly to the next stage, which is the stability phase of retirement. So this is when you've really gotten to the point where you've figured out exactly who you are now without your career. So I'll give you an example here. I work with a couple of retired teachers. They have been firmly planted in the stability phase for many years. One of them works part-time shuttling people to and from the airport. The other one volunteers for a local animal shelter. Both of them enjoy cruises. They go on 2 to 3 cruises per year. They bring their siblings on. They bring their nephews and nieces along with them. They don't actually have any kids of their own, but they take care of their nieces and nephews like they're their own kids. And they also have 4 cats, and they treat their cats like they're their own. For these retired teachers, their part-time work and their volunteer work is what really gives them a sense of purpose. And their quality time with family and friends gives them the social fulfillment that they need. And traveling to new places and having new experiences gives them the mental stimulus they need to retain a fresh outlook on life. So speaking of part-time work, this leads me to my next lesson, which is that retiring early doesn't necessarily mean retiring forever. One of my clients was the sole specialist in his field at the local college that he worked for before he retired. He's a woodworker by hobby, so he thought when he retired that this is what he was going to be spending a lot of his time doing. And the truth is that he is spending a lot of his time doing that. But after he retired from his position with the college that he worked for, he quickly found that he missed that sense of purpose and fulfillment that he got working in his field for decades. And he missed it so much that within 2 years, even though he didn't financially have to do this, he ended up working part-time teaching an online class in his field for another college on the other side of the country. So again, this wasn't because he needed the money, it was just because of the personal fulfillment he got from being the expert in his field. Another one of my clients is a guy who, instead of fully retiring, what he decided to do was take a contract position with his company. So what that meant was instead of working full time and working 40 plus hours a week, he was just going to work on his own terms, maybe 6 out of 12 months of the year. And so that allowed him to continue teaching new people that came into the business his skills that he had acquired over 4 decades, but then also maintain some of the relationships with people out west and in Mexico that he would otherwise lose touch with these people. He had no real reason to stay in touch with them. So this isn't unique to these clients at all. In fact, a recent survey from AARP said 4 in 10 people who retire actually end up unretiring and going back to work in some capacity. So let's recap our 5 lessons on early retirement. The first lesson is that retirement is not just about the money. Think about the people that are going to be in your life. Really think about what aspects of your job you might miss once you're retired. So that being said, financial complacency can be dangerous in retirement. So don't think that because your retirement plan looks good that you should retire and then never really look at your numbers again. That can cause a rude surprise in your retirement plan if you're spending, 50% more than what you had actually planned for. And you can imagine that over a long period of time, that's going to add up. So make sure you stress test your plan before you retire and then revisit it after you retire too. So also remember that your financial plan will get tested with things that are unexpected. When you retire with purpose. You're not retiring from something, you're retiring to something. And the last thing is retiring early doesn't mean retiring forever. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you retired early, I'd love to hear from you. How is it going? And if you have any wisdom to share with people who are considering early retirement, please drop those in the comments too.